Toronto folk singer is dead after she was attacked by a pair of coyotes.
What is the monkey doing? Tell me what's going on.
He ripped your face off!
We actually have a trainer in the water with one of our whales.
If I show weakness, if I retreat, I may be hurt, I may be killed.
Baby Azaria Chamberlain was taken by a dingo back in 1980.
Howdy doody, my little cuties, guys, gals, and my non-binary pals. Welcome back to Man Eaters, the only true crime podcast on the entire horrific clusterfuck of an internet where all the killers are real animals, whether it's biting, scratchings, maulings, or clawings. As always, we are here to talk about it. My name is James. I'm your host, a.k.a. Jimothy, a.k.a. Jambalaya, a.k.a. Big Boy with the big... koi. I have a koi fish now. Yeah, it's very difficult to keep alive. It cost me €600 and absolutely regret that purpose. Joining me, as usual, our co-host African Drum Circle. How are you, pal? That's right, we weren't here last week. To be fair, I have been releasing episodes pretty much fortnightly for the last few months. But you guys haven't seemed to mind, or at least the analytics seem to not indicate that, so we're going to keep doing that for the moment. But yeah, last week, even though I did plan to record an episode, was unable to. Yeah, that's right. Your boy had food poisoning. Oh, God, yes. Don't clap for that. Do not clap. Both ends, my friends. Didn't even mean to rhyme then. I'm a poet, and I didn't even realize the fact that I was one. I don't know how much information I should give on pod, but let's just. I'll tell you a little bit. Fast forward maybe a minute if you don't want to hear the gory details. I'll try to be kind of clean about it. As always, the culprit. A kebab. Well, not a kebab, a snack pack to be sure. And this, I'm not going to say the business because I love these guys. They love me. You go to a place that serves food too often when they start to know you by name. And this guy, I've never spoken to him before, but now whenever my order comes up, he's like, Jimmy, Mr. Chapman. And I'm like, okay, hey buddy, thank you. This particular time, however, seems that I guess some of that chicken was uncooked or there was something going on. But within the hour actually of eating it, I was curled over. I was absolutely fucked. It came out the back to start. Let's put it that way. And it was of a consistency that I figured a shower was a more efficient way to clean up than TP. So I'm in the shower. And I stopped the water, and I started to feel a little queasy, so I started the water back up again, and boom, out the front end, not my penis, my mouth, I was up chucking my bamboo. It was disgusting. And all that food, barely digested all the way back up. I thought I was being smart. I thought that in the shower, it's going to go down the drain. Clever, not at all. It actually absolutely clogged the drain. And when I opened my eyes, because I had my eyes closed because I didn't want to see what was happening, to my horror, the entire bathroom had flooded. It had flooded out of the shower all the way over to the toilet, everywhere. I mean, I guess without you knowing the layout of my bathroom, that doesn't mean anything. Just rest assured, it was an absolute freak show. And then I was up and down throughout the night. The biggest problem, and I've never actually experienced this before, I'd heard about it, was the dehydration. I was truly I couldn't keep water down. I'd take a sip of water and like an hour later, boom, out it comes. My piss was brown. I was genuinely worried for my health. I was very close to calling an ambulance to take me to the hospital because I couldn't move, couldn't keep any water down. It was getting pretty dire. Luckily, they say that it's only up to 24 hours you need to worry about going to the hospital. I lasted 22. And then I was able to keep stuff down. So not a fun time. I am very mad that it was like a restaurant that I love, that I frequent. If it was just a rando one, I could be like, well, I never have to go there again. I really love these guys. And I don't think that this one case of food poisoning is enough to keep me away. But for the moment, I am keeping my distance. I might maybe give it a month, see how we go. But anyway, that was the this side story about my food poisoning, we're going to talk about another kind of food poisoning. How do I segue this? How about it's not food poisoning, it's mood poisoning. And the mood is the mood in the Byzantine Empire. And the poison was a fucking whale. Can you hear that? Is there buzzing in the back? Good Lord. What a nightmare. My microphone. I need new equipment, gang. Patreon.com/maneaters. Please join over there so I can afford some better equipment. There we go. I think we're good. That's right. We are talking about a mad whale today and the empire that fought back. The empire that struck back. I don't know how to say it. Porphyrios. Porphyrios? We're going to get into it right now. Grab your wetsuit, gang, because we're going diving. Here we go. So, gang, today we're hopping into the Man-Eater's time machine and we're heading all the way back to the Mediterranean world hundreds of years ago in the Byzantine history age, or however you call it. Today we're diving, get it? That's a pun, into the very strange case of one of the most extraordinary real animals ever recorded in ancient history. We haven't done a lot of ancient history on the show before, but we are getting into that today. It was a giant whale that terrorized the Mediterranean world for decades. It was a creature so powerful and so annoying that even the emperors of the time discussed him. So infamous was he that he appeared in the great writings of the greatest Byzantine historians of his age. This wasn't mythology, okay? This wasn't a myth or a legend. He wasn't a sea serpent that we invented to scare children out of the water. And he wasn't a poetic metaphor for fucking Poseidon or whatever. This was a real animal. Fish, a flesh, bone, and a sexy, slick little blowhole. His name was Porphyrios. And for nearly 50 years, half a lifetime that is, Porphyrios patrolled the narrow waters between Europe and Asia like they were his own personal kingdom. Because guess what? It kind of was. The Bosphorus Strait. That twisting tidal choke point linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and feeding the beating commercial heart of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. Ships carrying grains, wine, timber, soldiers, messages, and dreams, they all had to pass through this bottleneck. Civilization well and truly depended on that channel. And Porphyrios, that dickhead that he was, he knew this. Or at least he acted like he did. Because he wasn't like a subtle little menace here. He wasn't just like a shadow below the waves or a fin on the horizon. No, Porphyrios may well have been nature's biggest dickhead because he announced himself when he showed up. A colossal, dark body exploding from the water, a living battering ram that hurled itself at ships with savage force, splintering hulls, flipping shipping boats, and smashing merchant galleys, sending sailors scrambling and praying and swearing that they would pay more attention at the temple next time. And unlike most of the dangerous animals of the ancient world, like the lions in the Colosseums or the snakes in the sandals, Porphyrios wasn't content with just a moment. He was a brief terror. He was a reign, a maritime tyrant with barnacles. This whale didn't simply exist. He persisted. Every fisherman in the area knew his name. Captains muttered it like a curse. Rrr, fucking Porphyrios. That's what they sounded like, minus the Australian accent. Children growing up in seaside villages heard bedtime warnings. I don't know what a Byzantine accent sounded like, so we're going to do one here. Sleep well, little one, and may Porphyrios not awake hungry. Yeah, that's good. Sailors blamed him for storms. They thought he was in charge of nature. Priests saw him as divine punishment from the gods. Superstitious dock workers swore he was the reincarnated fury of Poseidon himself, returned not with a trident, but with 40 feet of blubber and a lifetime hatred of timber craftsmanship. And what's remarkable here, what is genuinely astonishing, is that we know all of this not from folklore or from tavern songs or from like fishermen's exaggerated tales. We know this from primary historical sources. From Procopius to Caesare, the official court historian of Emperor Justinian, the man who rebuilt the Hagia Sophia and reshaped the empire. Porphyrios was a documented animal, alongside plagues, wars, and political upheaval, because he was, in fact, a crisis within himself. A whale so dedicated to being a maritime dickhead that the greatest empire on Earth effectively had one animal naval problems. He wasn't a shark, it wasn't a kraken, not a mythical leviathan born from fear and foam, just a whale, like any other whale, breathtaking and terrible, who may have been confused, territorial or injured, or simply just the most aggressive, petty marine animal to ever live. Today, we follow his wake through ancient waters, through scholarly debate, through the uneasy intersection of biology and legend. And we have to ask the question, what happens when nature selects one creature to remind an empire that the sea does not belong to them? This is the whale of a tale of Porphyrios, the ancient whale who declared war on the empire. So, we have to ask ourselves now, who or what exactly was Porphyrios? And why does a 6th century whale still have historians and marine biologists arguing about it 1500 years later? Well, let's take a rewind. It's the year 530 AD, and we're in the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of what was once Rome, now still very powerful and still glistening with golden mosaics, and ruled by one Emperor Justinian, a man famous for conquering half of the known world, and for building a church so big it makes people cry to this day, the Hagia Sophia, or the Hagia Sophia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, never been, looks pretty though. Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, it's the heart of the empire, a crossroads of trade, culture, and religion. And every day, fleets of ships sail through the Bosporus Strait, a thin, twisting ribbon of water connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. The entire empire depends on it. It's how wheat, wine, timber, and treasures move between the continents. And somewhere in those narrow, churning waters, a monster is lurking. The people call him Porphyrios, from the word porphyria, the Greek word for purple or dark red. That's why you might have heard the medical condition acute intermittent porphyria, which I remember from watching House, where your pee turns red or something. Now, some say it referred to his color, which I hope is not true because that would mean this whale looked like a giant purple cock. Others thought that it marked him as a royal, Porphyrios being a name reserved for emperors, nobles, and the truly great. Which honestly does feel quite appropriate because this whale didn't just live in the Bosphorus, he ruled it. Now, ancient writers weren't exactly known for their precision when it came to marine biology. To them, anything bigger than a dolphin was a whale. So a giant shark could be a whale. A big fish was a whale. Your ex-wife, a whale. Don't clap for my hacky jokes. But modern scientists, reading between the lines of Procopius' account, have taken a few educated guesses about Porphyrios' true identity. And yes, by the way, I am struggling with those two names occurring in quick succession. Porphyrios the whale and Procopius the man. Okay, so the top contender for Porphyrios' true identity. It is, drumroll please, everyone, the sperm whale, which we have talked about on the show before. Here's why we think he was a sperm whale. So the Bosporus Strait connects to deep oceanic waters where sperm whales sometimes stray. Sperm whales are enormous. They can grow up to 60 feet long, and they are known for their aggressive behavior, especially when they're confused, injured, or provoked. And yes, fun fact, sperm whales are one of the few marine animals ever recorded attacking ships on purpose. Moby Dick, yeah, not entirely fiction. Moby Dick was a sperm whale, as was the whale that sunk the Essex, which we have talked about in the past, and you can go listen to that. So, imagine, if you will, a sperm whale. And actually, let's take a moment to just get the sperm jokes out of the way. Let's just giggle about it. It's funny. Do you remember why they're called sperm whales? Because this is just a little bit of knowledge I'm going to spew at you. If you remember back from previous episodes, if you crack open a sperm whale's head and you go digging around where the brain is, between like the skull and the brain, there's this like fluid, and it's called spermaceti. And it was really valuable. They used it for a lot of things: candles, fuel, a lot of different things. Spermaceti was like liquid gold. The thing about spermaceti, though, is it looks like, and Mum turned down the podcast, it looks like cum. It just straight up looks like cum. Huge ropes of semen coming out of this giant fucking head. It looks like cum. And that is why we call it a sperm whale. Fucking wild. Anyway, so imagine sperm. A sperm whale, 40, maybe 50 feet long. Its head is like a wrecking ball, minus the Miley Cyrus riding it, and its jaws are full of conical teeth. It has the brain the size of a small car. Now imagine this moving through narrow channels filled with fragile wooden ships floating on the surface. To Porphyrios, those ships weren't commerce, they were intrusions of his home. They were buzzing, noisy, splashing intrusions. In a world before sonar or engines, the crash of oars and clatter of timber would have echoed for miles underwater. And to a whale's sensitive hearing, well, it might have just been unbearable. And so, he struck. Repeatedly. Furiously. Year after year after year. And what's incredible is that Porphyrios wasn't a phantom. Not a one-time attack. Not a get-in, get-out kind of guy. Not a sailor's exaggeration. He became a known presence in the area. Imagine you're a merchant captain in 530 AD, sailing with your cargo of olive oil and grain and prostitutes, I don't know. You're around the bend near Constantinople, and a deckhand nervously points into the water. Look over there, it's the big fishy. That's what he sounds like. And then you see it. A shadow. Huge, moving beneath the surface. Everyone look out, we know what it means. It's a big fishy. Out here in the Bosporus, the sea doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the dickhead Porphyrios. Because he's not a myth. He's an animal with a fucking postal code. A whale so territorial that for the next 50 years, sailors told each other not where the rocks were, or the reefs, or the hot little mermaids, but where Porphyrios was. And it is worth remembering something else. In a world steeped in superstition and religion, this wasn't just a big fish story, it was a theological crisis. If gods ruled the heavens and the emperor ruled the land, then Porphyrios ruled the seas. And he didn't take tributes either, he took boats. Porphyrios was here, and for half a century, the Byzantine Empire would struggle to coexist with the most irritatable whale in human history. Now, as stated before, Porphyrios didn't just appear and vanish, he stayed. He made this place his home and his own personal battlefield. Ancient records say that he was first spotted near Constantinople, the Byzantine capital, the richest city on earth at the time. From there, he ranged across from Propontis, the Sea of Marmara, and deep into the Aegean. Anywhere ships passed, he might be waiting. And for a while, people weren't really sure what to make of him. At first, sailors told stories of a big fishy, look out, a curiosity, a story to spice up a tavern after a long voyage. But soon, curiosity turned into catastrophe, because Porphyrios developed a nasty habit, a little bit of a hobby. He started attacking the ships. Picture it, okay? It's a calm day at sea, your crew is rowing a merchant galley loaded with fucking olive oil and cum, I don't know. The sun is warm, the waters are glassy, the coastal gleams with marble villas, and then a deep vibration. Not the one your wife likes when she sits on the washing machine either. It's a tremor under your feet. It feels like thunder coming from below. And then something massive surges beneath the hull. You barely have time to shout before the entire boat lurches sideways. Glasses shatter, sailors tumble overboard, a geyser of seawater sprays into the air, and then you see it. A dark shape, the size of your ship, rising and falling, moving with impossible strength. The water explodes again, and then crack! The hull splits. You're in the fucking sea now, clinging to a plank, watching your cargo sink while a whale the size of a city glides past as if he owns the place. And he does. This was a Porphyrios attack. Now, Procopius, our main source for today, wrote that the whale, quote, spent 50 years attacking all the ships it passed by. That's my Constantinople accent. We're just going to have to deal with it. Not one ship, not one fleet, but all ships that passed through for half a century Porphyrios targeted. He described Porphyrios as a creature of great size and strength who rejoiced at the destruction of ships. That's right. This weird historian said he fucking enjoyed it. This whale didn't just smash boats, he took pleasure in it, which is honestly so much more terrifying. The ancient world had just discovered the concept of a maritime supervillain, and it wasn't random either. Porphyrios seemed to target vessels. He'd spot them, he'd approach slowly, and then he would ram with full force. When he missed, he'd circle back for another go. Persistence that would make even the Terminator jealous. Sailors learned to fear every ripple, every shift in the current. The mere whisper that Porphyrios had been seen near a trade route was enough to delay voyages. Merchants refused to sail through the Bosporus Strait without divine offerings. Fishermen prayed at the docks. Priests held ceremonies to appease the gods of the sea. This wasn't just an animal. It was a full-blown economic and spiritual crisis. Now, it's worth pausing here to remember exactly what the 6th century kind of looked like. The Byzantine Empire was constantly at war, fighting Persians in the east, Vandals in Africa, revolts at home, plague was coming, and as always, taxes were very high. And on top of everything, we have a fucking whale wrecking the shipping industry. Can you imagine the conversations in the government? Your Majesty, the treasury is empty, and we've lost Syria, and also, the whale is back. It's honestly beautiful. And then, it is a reminder that history's empires, with all of their pomp and marble and ambition, were still at the mercy of the natural world. Because you can command armies, but you can conquer nations. You cannot reason with a whale. Now, just how dangerous was Porphyrios really, okay? Like, be honest, how dangerous can a fucking whale be? Why can't we kill this thing? Well, Procopius doesn't actually list casualties, but his tone says everything. This wasn't an occasional nuisance, it was a maritime terror campaign. Ships capsized, cargo was lost, and once your vessel went down in these cold straits, survival was slim. The currents were brutal, and the water was deep. Even if you weren't dragged under by wreckage, hypothermia and exhaustion could do the rest. And here's the thing, Porphyrios wasn't even eating people. Not once does any record mention him attacking or consuming a sailor, because he wasn't a predator in the usual man-eater's sense. He was something else. He was a whale at war with human activity itself, which makes him kind of perfect for today's episode, because man-eaters isn't just about the animals that devour us, it's about the animals that remind us that we're really not in charge. And Porphyrios, well, he was the sea's rebellion made flesh. As the years went on, his legend only grew. Merchants began to mark him on charts. Fishermen swapped rumors about his movements. Whole fleets reportedly changed courses to avoid him. And think about that. A single animal changing trade routes before GPS, before radar, and before steel hulls. The empire bent its will around a whale. Now, some believe that he was sent by God as punishment for human arrogance. Others say that he was Poseidon's servant, keeping mortals humble. And more practical minds probably just thought, well, we've made him angry. Maybe we just stop sailing into him. But no one could stop him. For decades, Porphyrios was undefeated. Until one day, he wasn't. Half a century of chaos, Porphyrios made one final mistake. This whale had survived wars, storms, and fleets, but the same sea that gave him his power could also take it away, and his downfall was coming next. So, let's ask the question everyone's been asking since the beginning of the episode. Why? Why did Porphyrios hate boats so much? Most whales just swim, sing, and just generally vibe. They don't develop a 50-year vendetta against maritime commerce. They don't personally inconvenience emperors, and they don't wake up and choose violence. So what the hell was going on here? Well, let's dive into the theories. Part maritime biology, part ancient history, part psychology of a very, very, very angry sea mammal. Now, the Bosporus Strait isn't exactly peaceful. It is a narrow, deep channel with intense currents, cold, oxygen-rich water flowing in from the Black Sea, and warmer Mediterranean water pushing back underneath. So it's turbulent, it's noisy, and it's unpredictable. To a whale, that's a confusing, high-stress environment. And Porphyrios, well, he may have simply decided, this is my spot, guys, like it or not. He's like a grumpy landlord who doesn't really understand public domain. Whales are intelligent animals. They're social and emotional creatures. They form attachments to feeding grounds and migration corridors, and they have been known to defend them. If ships started flooding the area, or start slapping the surface and anchors start dropping, well, he might have seen this as a direct invasion of his space. And this was the 6th century. There's no sonar or propellers or steel hulls, just wood and marble, which meant every ship that Porphyrios attacked was small enough for him to physically destroy. The whale equivalent of flipping someone's car for parking in your driveway. So yeah, it's possible Porphyrios wasn't actually evil. Basically, how no animal is evil. He was just extremely bad at conflict resolution. There's another possibility here. He thought the ships were living things. Sperm whales hunt giant squid in deep waters. They use echolocation, bouncing sound off objects to quote-unquote see in the dark. But if Porphyrios wandered into shallower seas where sound behaves differently, his sonar might have been a little confused. To echolocation, a wooden hull might not sound that different from a big squishy creature, especially a moving one. So imagine the poor guy, thinking he's found the biggest squid of his life. He rushes up, rams it, bites it, and the thing splinters apart. Barrels, ropes, human entrails, total chaos. Confusing, terrifying, and more than likely painful for him as well. From then on, every time he saw one of those fucking floating creatures, he thought, nope, not again, and he started smashing them on sight. So maybe Porphyrios wasn't angry at the ships, maybe he was traumatized, which is honestly kind of making the whole thing a little bit sad. So now we get darker into another theory, because there's a chance that Porphyrios wasn't just confused or territorial, he was actually hurt. Ancient fishermen often used harpoons, nets, and traps to catch whales and other large sea animals. If Porphyrios got entangled or stuck, it could have caused long-term pain or disfigurement, which would explain why he started associating ships with danger. Imagine being a 50-ton creature, minding your own business, and suddenly getting stabbed by a bunch of bipeds in a glorified canoe. You'd develop some feelings about that for sure. And whales do remember. We know from modern studies that sperm whales and orca have complex emotional memories, and they form social alliances. They grieve their dead, and they respond to threats with coordinated aggression. So maybe Porphyrios' rampage wasn't exactly random. Maybe it was vengeance. Slow, deliberate, generational. A 50-year feud between one whale and human civilization itself. Basically like the Count of Monte Cristo, but wetter. Now here's the scientific wildcard. Porphyrios might have been sick. Not physically, but neurologically. Whales can suffer from parasitic infections that affect their brain. Disorientation, aggression, strange repetitive behaviors, all possible symptoms. If a parasite or brain injury warped his perception, he could have started lashing out at anything he didn't recognize. The ancient world wouldn't have understood that. To them, it would have looked like divine fury. But in reality, it could have been a whale in distress, stuck in a feedback loop of panic and revenge. Unfortunately, we'll never know. But it is a sobering reminder that behind even the scariest legends, there might be real suffering. Finally, we come to potentially the simplest theory. Porphyrios just didn't like boats. He was just a dickhead. Maybe the sound bothered him, maybe the smell of pitch and tar reminded him of bad experiences, or maybe he was just that one whale with a bad attitude. Every species has one. For us, it's, who should I rip on? Bad attitude? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Jeremy Renner's attitude. Let's call that. He's the Porphyrios of humanity. Every species has one, and ours is Jeremy Renner. That one goose that always attacks joggers, that one cat that knocks over your drink while you're looking him dead in the eyes, Jeremy Renner. And maybe Porphyrios was just that, the Jeremy Renner of the ocean. Really, it's kind of beautiful. Because even in a world full of wars, politics, and empires, there's still room for one whale to decide, nah, I don't like this, I'm going to ruin everyone's fucking day. Whatever the reason, confusion, pain, revenge, or pure personality, Porphyrios became something rare, a single animal that impacted human history. He wasn't a species-level threat like sharks or crocodiles, he was an individual. A biological outlier who somehow forced one of the greatest civilizations on Earth to acknowledge him. And that's why his story endures. Because in a world obsessed with human drama, emperors, generals, revolts, a whale becomes a historical figure. He had a name, he had a legacy, and as we're about to see, he even had a final tragic act. Because 50 years after his dominance, Porphyrios would finally meet the one enemy he couldn't defeat. Not a harpoon, not a fleet of ships, but the sea itself. For 50 years, Porphyrios had ruled the Bosphorus Strait. He'd attacked galleys, ferries, and merchant ships. He'd survived the emperor's navy and become a legend so feared that sailors prayed to God before setting sail, not for safe passage, but for the whale's mercy. But around the year 550 AD, that reign came to an end. Not with a heroic battle or an act of divine vengeance, but with a mistake. Because even monsters can have bad days. It started on an early morning. A ship was crossing the Bosphorus, one of countless vessels Porphyrios had harassed before. Maybe he recognized the shape of the hull, or the sound of the sailors on board. Maybe the ship's shadow looked like the hundreds that invaded his waters over the years. Whatever it was, something triggered Porphyrios. And like he'd done so many times before, the whale dove deep. And then he rose. He surged upwards, his massive head breaking the surface, water exploding around him, and he slammed into the side of the ship. The impact was catastrophic. The ship shuddered, cracked, nearly broke apart, but not before one of the crew managed to turn it. The vessel twisted sharply, scraping along the shallows of the Propontis, the Sea of Marmara, dragging Porphyrios with it. In his fury, the whale had chased too far inland, and he found himself trapped. The sea beneath him was only a few meters deep, far too shallow for a creature of that size. He tried to retreat, thrashing, rolling his massive tail, slapping the surface with thunderous cracks that echoed across the bay. But every movement made things worse. His belly scraped the seabed, his fins churned up sand and silt, and with every convulsion he sank deeper into the mud. From the shore, fishermen and soldiers watched in awe and terror. They'd heard the stories their whole life, the killer whale of the Bosphorus, the scourge of ships, and now there he was, still alive, but hopeless. It must have been a really surreal sight. This dark, glistening mountain of flesh rolling in the surf, water turning red where his skin tore amongst the rocks. The creature that had terrorized an empire now reduced to bellowing in pain, the sound echoing through the strait like a foghorn from hell. For a while, no one dared approach. Even stranded, Porphyrios was dangerous. Every movement could crush a man flat. But as the hours passed, his thrashing slowed. The tide began to fall, and the men grew bolder. They waded out with axes, harpoons, knives, and when they reached him, they started cutting. Procopius writes that they, quote, rushed upon him with spears and axes, hacking at his flesh until the sea ran red with blood. They didn't do it for revenge. Not really. They did it because, well, capitalism, baby. Whale oil was incredibly valuable. They did it because meat was scarce and because when a god falls from the sky, people don't build a shrine. They simply take what's useful. Within a day, Porphyrios was dead. a legend brought down by mud and gravity. When word reached Constantinople, there was celebration, but also disbelief. The unkillable beast was finally gone. The emperor's merchants could sail again without fear, and for a brief moment, the sea belonged to humans once again. But Procopius, the man who recorded Porphyrios' story, well, he doesn't sound triumphant. His tone, reading between the lines, feels almost sad, as though he knew what the loss meant. Because Porphyrios wasn't just an animal, he was a myth made real. A reminder that even in the heart of the empire, nature still had champions. It is strange. For 50 years, Porphyrios was seen as a monster. But when he died, people didn't cheer. They simply stood on the beach, stared at what they'd done. I'm sure some of them even wept. Because for all the destruction he caused, Porphyrios had been part of their world. And his death marked the end of a chapter. It also marked something bigger. A kind of wilderness that would never be tamed. And maybe that's why, 1500 years later, we still remember his name. Porphyrios, the whale who fought an empire and lost only to the tide. And that is the tale of the mad whale Porphyrios, who went up against an empire and ultimately won. Because it wasn't the empire that took him down. It was just buoyancy in a low tide, I guess. An incredible story. I've got to say, the stories of not killer whales, but killer whales, big whales that kill, not killer whale, not orca. You know what I'm saying? They're kind of some of my favorite. Like the real life Moby Dicks. I love it. A lot of dick stuff going on today, isn't there? Moby Dick, sperm whale, cum. Anyway, let's take a quick break and we will be back with the rest of our episode. Go and do a wee. Und we are back. Let's jump into the next part of our show. One of my favorite parts of the day. One of my favorite parts of the entire week. The best thing I can do with myself. Look at animal attacks in the news and talk about them. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, it is the scratch of the day. We're going to Hollywood a little bit here because a Game of Thrones editor has been killed by a lion after it jumped through her car window. That is a pretty wild headline. Sorry, I just got distracted by this is from the Mirror US, and I'm looking at the top, the banners of all the things. So it has, that's so strange. It has a bunch of different topics you can click on. Things like entertainment, sports, US news. And then it also has Donald Trump. Like he's his own thing. Crazy. Unfortunately, it wasn't Donald Trump attacked and killed by a lion. It was this Game of Thrones editor. So let's read about that. A Game of Thrones editor was killed by a lion during a safari trip in a horrific attack after the animal leaped through an open vehicle window. Catherine Chappell, 29 years old, was traveling through a safari park close to Johannesburg in South Africa when her dream vacation became a tragedy. She rolled down a window to photograph a lion resting on the ground. Without warning, it rose up on its back legs, sprang forward, and attacked her through the window. Eyewitness Ben Govender told the New York Post, "We saw the guy diving into the passenger seat and punching at the lioness. It comes after a tragedy as a zookeeper was ripped apart by a lion for 15 minutes as staff revealed no one helped." After the first bite, the lioness retreated from the car with blood dripping from her mouth and paw. The animal then staged a second devastating attack, savaging its victim, Ben added. Her face was torn apart. The right side of her chest was gone. Nothing could have been done to save that woman. He said that the lion, quote, had half of her shoulder in its mouth during the assault. guide Pierre Potgeider, who bravely attempted to save Catherine's life, experienced a heart attack in what he described as the worst experience of his life. The park promises, quote, super close-up views and claims that visitors can, quote, get close to a pride of lions and other animals and still be completely safe. Scott Simpson, the assistant operations manager at Lion Park, launched an investigation into the incident alongside police. He said, quote, when you drive through, I'm just assuming he's South African, when you drive through the lion enclosure, which is separate from the rest of the park, you get handed a slip of paper at the gates reminding you to keep your windows closed at all times. We have extreme signage absolutely everywhere, warning people to keep them shut. Kevin Richardson, a South African wildlife specialist known as the Lion Whisperer, explained that lions can, quote, lose their natural fear of humans in these types of safari parks. He told NBC News, people visiting lion parks should be particularly careful and to adhere to the rules as such markings, making sure their windows are not rolled down too far. Wild lions fear people and animals. That is why you can view them safely in top open vehicles. Catherine's relatives issued a statement on Facebook that read, Katie was a brilliant, kind, adventurous, and high-spirited woman. Her energy and passion could not be contained by mere continents or oceans. She was very much loved and shared her love for life with those she met. At her memorial service, her sister, Jennifer Ringwald, described her as, quote, fearless. She said, Katie had an unbridled passion for everything under the sun. Nobody who met her could ever forget her. Her flaw was that she was 5'4", 90-pound woman, but deep down she believed she was a 6'4", 250-pound man. Catherine, a special effects editor, was part of the Game of Thrones team that bagged an Emmy for the 2014 episode titled The Children. Originally from New York, she relocated to Vancouver in 2013 to work on the hit series and also contributed to films like Captain America and Divergent. It comes after a Hollywood animal trainer was brutally killed by a bear he'd raised since childhood when a stunt went horribly wrong. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. That's a pretty terrible way to go out. I'm sure that she was probably experiencing, having a great time on safari. I was meant to go safari 2 weeks ago at Toronto Zoo, at Dublin Zoo. Couldn't go because I was too sick. But yeah, when I do go, I will make sure that I keep my my windows rolled all the way up. Which, that's just a shame. Very sad. Let's talk about this next one. By the way, I just want to make a side note here too. There was another story I wanted to talk about. It was a dog attack that happened in Uralla. Not particularly exciting. Like every other dog attack, it attacked, I believe, an elderly man. But I wanted to mention it because that's where my dad is from. Uralla, very small country town near Armidale in New South Wales, but tiny. Like my dad said, there were like 10 people who went to his school. And he was like, he had to share a classroom with kindergarten kids when he was in year 12. So, he wouldn't, no, not year 12. I think he finished in like year 8. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. Shout out to Uralla. All right, let's read this one. This animal spared my life. Biologist bitten in the head by a shark hopes to meet it once again. This is from the BBC. Mauricio Hoyos still remembers the pressure that the jaws of a female Galapagos shark, over 3 meters in length, exerted on his skull. The animal had lunged at him with astonishing speed, giving him barely enough time to duck his head in a last-ditch effort to protect his jugular vein. Quote, when it closed its jaw, I felt the pressure of the bite, and then, after what I think was a second, it opened up again and let me go. Hoyos told BBC Mundo from his home in Baja, California, Mexico. California, Mexico? What? I guess there's a California in Mexico. A little over a month after surviving the incident. Hoyos, a marine biologist with over 30 years of experience studying sharks and their natural habitats, was on a research trip to Costa Rica when he was attacked by the shark in September. Less than 2 months on, and still bearing the scars from the attack on his face, he describes his recovery as, quote, incredible, and says he even hopes to encounter his assailant again. For Hoyos, what happened to him that day off the waters of Cocos Islands is the result of normal animal behavior when confronted with a perceived threat. In this case, the bite was like a dog's, he said. Have you ever seen how dogs, when another dog gets too close, throw a quick bite? It doesn't hurt it, but it calms the other dog down. Hoyos, who along with his colleagues attaches acoustic tags to sharks to help pinpoint their mating and spawning grounds as part of his work, was alerted to the shark's presence in the waters by tourists. It was at a depth of 40 meters, and Hoyos told the captain of the boat that he would be there for a maximum of 5 minutes. He then entered the water and began his slow descent. Hoyos recalls encountering the shark. Quote, "This giant female, measuring between 3 and 3.5 meters, swam by and headed towards the bottom, and I positioned myself to tag her at the base of her dorsal fin." But Hoyos, who has tagged many different kinds of sharks in his decades-long career, says this animal reacted differently to others. Quote, "Obviously the metal tip attached to the cable hanging from the probe, goes in it. And unlike other sharks I've tagged that immediately flee, she turned around and stared at me," he recalls. "I saw her little eye looking at me, and I saw her very calmly turning around." Hoyos says he held the shark's gaze as it swam away, but then suddenly, out of nowhere, it lunged at him. Quote, "I lowered my head, and what I felt was its lower jaw digging into my cheek and its upper jaw into my head. I was there, I imagined for a second, no more, inside its jaw, and then it simply opened again. When it closed it, I felt the pressure of the bite, and then it let me go," he marveled. The Galapagos shark's 29 serrated teeth not only left Hoyos with deep wounds to his head and face, but also severed the airline to his diving apparatus. He had survived the shark attack, but he was still in mortal danger. In addition, one of the teeth had torn his diving mask, and the blood-tinged water was further blurring his already limited vision. Quote, "When I realized that no air was coming out of the hose, I grabbed a second one we have, which we call an octopus, that is used to give someone air if they need it," he tells BBC Mundo. Quote, "But then I realized that the regulator wasn't working and was blowing air instead of regulating it, so I had to remember my training and start regulating it with my lips." Bleeding, blinded, and with air escaping, Hoyos calculated that he had less than a minute to reach the surface. Quote, "Since I couldn't see anything, what I did was look for the light that I knew was the surface. I started swimming upwards in a very coordinated manner because I wanted to avoid erratic movements that could attract the shark." Hoyos then reached the surface. A young man pulled him aboard the boat, and when the captain saw his condition, he called the park ranger station to report the incident. Hoyos explained that he didn't feel the pain of the injuries until much later. Quote, "Obviously, I had adrenaline in my system, but the bite didn't hurt that much. What hurt the most was the impact. When the shark bit me, an animal 3 meters long and at that speed, it was like getting hit by a car. In fact, I ended up with a huge bruise all over my jaw. I thought it was broken." When they docked, a team of paramedics was ready to provide him with emergency care. Hoyos was lucky. As well as surviving the attack and the subsequent ascent, none of his wounds became infected, and the healing process took less time than anyone could have imagined. Quote, "The doctors told me it was amazing. The attack happened on the 27th of September. I had a 34-hour trip. They performed a surgical debridement, removing the damaged tissue, and 2 days later they were already evaluating whether they could perform reconstructive surgery." It could have been far worse for Hoyos. According to doctors, a young man who had survived a Galapagos shark attack in the same area in 2017 had to remain in a hyperbaric chamber for almost a month because his wounds weren't healing properly. Quote, "They told me my recovery had been incredible. After the surgery, the doctors confessed how worried they'd been about an infection because being on my face, it was a direct path to the brain." Smiling broadly, Hoyos adds that he is already planning to get back in the water and has a diving trip booked for the 14th of November, which was yesterday. Wow. And he says that after having survived an attack of this magnitude, he has even more respect for the animals that he studies. Quote, "Many people think that the ocean would be better off without sharks, but they really say that because they don't understand the crucial role sharks play in maintaining their delicate balance." Pointing to the large scar on his cheek, he says, "This is the proof that the female who spared my life, and I can't put it another way. And this will allow me to continue speaking well of sharks and advocating for their conservation in the future." Meanwhile, the Galapagos shark that had Hoyos in its jaws continues its natural life in the depths, and he hopes to see it again. And since he was able to mark it before it attacked him, that possibility does exist. Quote, In January, I'm going to the Cocos Islands. We have a trip booked from the 20th to the 27th. And obviously, I'm going to Roka Sukia, where the attack happened. I'm going down there, he says, undeterred. Well, there you go. What an incredible story. He's a bit of a bragger, let's be honest. My recovery is awesome. The doctor said my recovery is like the best recovery. I don't think he probably talks like that, but I did say he was from California. But California, Mexico. So I don't really know what a Mexican Valley Girl would sound like. Probably awful, if we're being completely honest. Okay, before we go, I want to give you a quick update on something that's been going on recently in the world of animal attacks. As you would probably be aware, Japan is currently having its worst spree of bear attacks in history, and they're also on their biggest killing spree of bears for more than 100 years as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Because I think it's worth having an update. The bear attacks have been rising steadily. 2025 has been the worst year for bear attacks. In fact, since April of 2025, which was the start of the fiscal year in Japan, there have been 7 confirmed deaths from bear attacks, which is the highest on record since the data gathering began in 2006. According to other reports, some sources say that up to 12 people have died since April. And injury-wise, between April and September, there have been 99 incidents resulting in 108 people being harmed. There have also been a severe spike in sightings and collisions. Bear sightings are surging, particularly in northeastern Japan and Hokkaido. And there's been a sharp rise in vehicle collisions with bears, including cars and bikes. In Akita Prefecture alone, 118 collisions have been recorded as of October 2025, which is more than 5 times the number of all of 2024. Which is obviously quite a huge spike. The worst affected areas are in the northeast, in Tohoku and Hokkaido as well. Some individual places are under acute pressure. For example, the town of Kazuno in Akita Prefecture has actually seen Japanese troops be deployed to the area. Now, the locals have been told to avoid the forest, especially after dark, and some have actually been warned to not leave food outside, which attracts bears. That is behavior that anyone who lives near a bear would know. You don't leave food outside. You don't want them to be accustomed to food being around you, because then they will associate you with food. It's made Japanese hikers very nervous as well, because in a recent survey, 77% of respondents said that they felt anxious about hiking because of their bear reports, and over half of them said that they had changed or had cancelled their plans. It's a huge shame. I've always wanted to go hiking through Japan. Particularly based on my, what do you call it? I've been playing Ghost of Yotei. Makes me really, really want to go to Japan and hike around and pretend I'm a samurai. Really, really cool stuff. Now, there have even been bears entering supermarkets. Some have entered homes and other populated zones as well. So, why is this happening? Well, there are a few key drivers here. One big factor is a shortage of natural food sources for bears, particularly beech nuts and acorns. Now, why is this happening? Well, one possibility, unfortunately, is climate change. Climate shifts are disrupting hibernation patterns and food availability, which means that bears are more active and more likely to roam into human terrain. It also means that if the hibernation is shorter, it means that the bears are active for more of the year, which means they're eating more of the food. It also means the food has less time to replenish. So that is partially a reason why there is a food shortage for some of these bears. There's also a growing bear population. Brown bears, particularly in Hokkaido, they've increased in number over recent decades. At the same time, there's a declining number of active hunters, many of who are aging out of the job, and fewer people are taking it up. Rural depopulation means more abandoned land and farmland, which can be attractive to bears. So let's talk about what the government and authorities are doing to try to quell this problem. They are developing the SDF, which is the Self-Defense Forces. Japan has sent military personnel to towns like Kazuno to help set traps, transport hunters, and support bear control operations. These troops always carry bear spray and protective gear, and they work well with hunters. They're hiring more bear hunters as well. The government is planning to hire more licensed hunters, also known as government hunters, to help cull problem bears. Part of the strategy also includes relaxing some gun laws or permissions. Local authorities may now more readily authorize emergency shootings in residential areas. There's also been an interministerial response. A government meeting was held involving multiple ministries, including environment, education, defense, and transport, to coordinate countermeasures against the bears. They're renewing a set of measures by mid-November aimed at reducing bear-human conflict. And they've also given a fair amount of public advice and warnings. Residents are being urged to be cautious, especially in bear-prone regions. They've been told to avoid leaving food waste, keep alert in forested or mountainous areas, and to use noises, example bells, while hiking. People often play music out loud as well, which is probably the only acceptable time to be walking around with a Bluetooth speaker going off. There are also technological and behavioral deterrents being deployed. In some places, motion-sensitive devices that emit high-pitched sounds to scare bears away are being used. So let's talk about why it is a particularly difficult problem that they're dealing with. Well, one of those reasons is there is an insufficient hunting capacity. With fewer hunters, many of them who are old and at retirement age, it is hard to keep the bear population in track. Growing risk zones, bears no longer are confined to deep forests. They've increasingly been seen in semi-urban and even residential areas. There's a tension between protecting people and preserving wildlife too. When the attacks are serious, bears are also viewed as part of nature. In many parts of Japan, they're viewed as spiritual and sacred. So there is that line there as well. And again, climate uncertainty. Because food scarcity is linked to climate change, it's not a simple seasonal fix. We need long-term structural or ecological solutions to fix this issue. The bottom line here is that the escalating crisis is pretty bad. Japan is facing a very serious and unusually bad year for bear-human conflicts. The problem is not just one rogue bear, it's deeply tied to ecological shifts, human demographics, and policy shortcomings. The government is increasing its response, including military, hunters, and legal changes, but coexistence will remain a major challenge going into 2026. This problem is likely to get worse before it gets better. So it is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And if you are in Japan and you're listening, I don't know how you follow along, but yeah, I would love to hear from anyone in any of those regions affected by bears, even if it's not Japan, even if you're from North America or Europe and you have bear issues in your region, let me know. I remember one dude sent me a photo of a fucking a bear that was trying to chew into his trailer, which was pretty awesome. He said he was going to take a gun and blow its head off, which was maybe the most American thing I'd ever heard of. So gang, that is probably going to do it for our episode today. Before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to our Patreon pals. These are the people who support the show over on Patreon. Our $5 Puma tier. I want to give a big thanks to Lexi and Alyssa. At the $10 Leopard tier, Jack Brown, my man. Jack and Lexi are actually married. And they told me that they took a trip to, I think it was Colorado for their wedding, and they listened to this show on the way up. And hey, if that's not going to get you in the mood, what possibly could? At the $20 Lion tier, big thanks to Lizzie, and a huge thanks to Dawn, who's been here since day one. Honestly, years on the Patreon there. I can't thank you enough, Dawn. You're the best. And at the $50 Tiger tier, the biggest tier, we have Aubrey. Thank you so much. Guys, if you're interested in supporting the podcast, helping me get some better equipment, doing more episodes, doing more stuff, head over to patreon.com/maneaters. Trying to put as much content as I can out there. I'm hopefully shifting my lifestyle a little bit next year so that I can focus more on this show, more on theatre, more on acting. I would like to be able to do a bit more of the art and stuff that I like to be doing. So if you're able to support me by heading over to the Patreon, that is fantastic. Even if you just want to support me by smashing the like button wherever you are, or sharing this episode, or giving it a comment. Commenting is great. It really pushes the episode. Do all that stuff. I love your faces. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. And as always, guys, stay safe out there, because as we've learned, it's a jungle out there.